Good evening and welcome to Engage and Empower Me, a patient engagement design course here at Stanford School of Medicine. I'm Dr. Kyra Bobinette, and along with my co-faculty, Dr. Larry Chu, we welcome you to this class, wonderful class tonight. Our moderator this evening is e-patient Hugo Campos, who is an e-patient scholar for Stanford MedX here. He's a strong advocate for health data liberation so that patients can be in control and own their own information. So he'll be delivering our first Ignite talk this evening, and take it away, Hugo. Oh, after this message.
If you're joining us for the first time, a quick reminder that there's a simultaneous conversation happening on Twitter right now using the hashtag MedX. Hugo Campos is the in-class moderator for today's program and will be taking questions from social media. So please make sure to start up your Twitter client to join in the online conversation and interact with today's speakers. Christopher Snyder, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the online tweet chat discussion this evening. Please also make sure to like our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/StanfordMedX. Please note, you are watching a live online program and there is a delay between real-time events and the live stream you are watching. Tweets from our in-studio guests will appear before you see the real-time events they are tweeting about unfold on the video live stream. If you're enjoying this class, please join us again next quarter for Design for Health, a new class from the Stanford University School of Medicine on applying design innovation to improving healthcare. This course is brought to you by Stanford Medicine X, and weekly programs begin April 3rd, 2014. Dr. Larry Chu and Kyra Bobinette will serve as co-directors of the course.
So I was asked to share with you my view on patient engagement. For those of you who don't know my story, I am a person living with a chronic cardiac condition that puts me at risk of a sudden cardiac arrest. And because for this reason I have an implantable defibrillator. I've had the device for about 6 years. And the device is there to prevent a sudden cardiac arrest from happening. But the device gets revised or reviewed, or data has downloaded from the device every 4 to 6 months. So it means that there's a great deal of interaction on my part with healthcare services. So I guess we can call it engagement. So in terms of patient engagement, we hear the term patient engagement everywhere we look these days. And so it's a kind of a big deal. It's sort of like the ultimate buzzword, I would say. It even has its own Twitter hashtag, and we all know that if it's got its own Twitter hashtag, it's arrived, right? It's important. But depending on whom you ask, patient engagement means different things. It can mean compliance. It can mean whether patients are taking their medication or not. It can mean a marketing strategy for hospitals, or perhaps even a meaningful use objective for hospitals to collect those hefty meaningful use checks. But it even has been called the blockbuster drug of the century and the holy grail of healthcare. So it's a big deal. But my point is that it only has meaning for those folks who work in healthcare. In my opinion, patient engagement reflects a sort of internalized paternalism. I say this because most patients don't really give a crap about patient engagement. I couldn't care less about patient engagement. Most patients don't even know what it means. And that's quite ironic in this world where everyone is talking about patient-centric healthcare, which is another buzzword. But from my perspective, which is a patient's perspective, there's only one type of engagement, and it really is my level of involvement with my own care. So what patients really want is not really engagement. What patients want is autonomy. Engagement is a means to an end, not an end in itself. But autonomy is true empowerment. Patients are the ones who suffer or improve. Patients are the ones who live or die. The kind of engagement patients want is engagement with their families, it's engagement with their friends, it's engagement with the things that we love to do in life. Nobody I know wants engagement with hospitals or engagement with healthcare services or engagement with their doctors, no matter how nice their doctors might be. So the question we really should be asking, in my view, is, are we doing all that we can to empower patients with the tools, to enable patients with the technology, and to equip patients with the data, with the information necessary for them to care for themselves and for their loved ones? Are we doing all that we can to encourage and respect their autonomy? So self-tracking, for example, has given me some insight into my health. It has made me aware of triggers about my cardiac arrhythmias, and it has helped me learn about my condition. So technology, to some extent, has empowered me and enabled me to care for myself. And to empower patients is really to allow them to engage with healthcare in the level that they choose, of their choosing. Allow them to engage in healthcare as much as they want to engage. And to me, it's much more important to find an engaged doctor than it is to think of myself as an engaged patient. Because an engaged doctor values and encourages my contribution. Because an engaged doctor motivates me to do everything in my power to improve my condition. And because an engaged doctor understands what it means to work together with an empowered partner. And any doctor that is not engaged is not right for me. Think about it. That's it. So we have an exciting group of speakers tonight. Really great group. Ernesto Ramirez, Chris Hogg, and Rick Valencia. And we're going to jump right into it. I think we have a wonderful audience on Twitter as well. And I encourage your questions from Twitter, and I encourage your questions from the audience and your participation. It's all about participatory medicine. So I suppose we'll go right into this. The first speaker we have here is Ernesto Ramirez. Ernesto is the program director for Quantified Self Labs, the organization that supports the worldwide Quantified Self movement. He is also a PhD candidate in public health at the University of California, San Diego, and San Diego State University, where he is exploring what it means to live with data. And if you will join me in welcoming Ernesto. Thank you.
Time to take another shout out to Twitter. If you are following this conversation online or on Twitter, Christopher Schneider, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag. If you are just joining us, we have with us today Chris Hogg, Ernesto Ramirez, and Rick Valencia, who will be speaking on the topic of self-tracking. When, who, and for how long will patients engage? Along with ePatient speaker and moderator Hugo Campos. ePatients and caregivers out there, what questions do you have for our speakers today? What might you like to ask our speakers about using self-tracking for patient engagement? Healthcare providers, technologists, and researchers out there, what are the real-world problems you are facing that you think might be addressed through a better use of self-tracking for behavior change? Tweet us your questions or responses, and we'll do our best to have our speakers address them during this class at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Engage and Empower Me for Thursday, March 6th, 2014.
All right. Like Hugo said, my name is Ernesto, Program Director for Quantified Self Labs. I'm going to start off this talk by just telling you a little bit about me and then get into kind of what we do around quantified self, what we care about, and what we're looking to engage you all with as a community. This big number up here, 11,141,310, is the number of steps I have taken since February 28th, 2011, which was just like 2 months after you could actually buy a Fitbit and then actually really get it in the mail. What that breaks down to is 10,147 steps per day. So I am meeting the government's guidelines. Barack Obama would be very happy with me. Actually, Michelle Obama would be very happy with me. I'm definitely moving. I sleep about 7 hours a night, so I broke it down. For my waking hours, I'm moving about 597 steps per minute. So those numbers don't really probably mean a whole lot to you. But there we go. This might mean something to you. This is the actual step breakdown for every single one of those days where I actually have data for my steps. So you can see the lots of green bars. The darker the green color, the more steps I have on that day. Does that work? Oh, it works. So this is the darkest one. That's a marathon that I did, the Marine Corps marathon. This right here, this next darkest one, is actually Disneyland. It was a long trip at Disneyland. A fun trip, but a long trip at Disneyland. I live in Los Angeles. So this is me. This is my physical activity data. I mentioned I live in Los Angeles. I also use another application called Moves. It does location tracking on your phone as well as some activity tracking. This is every single location I've been in Los Angeles where I've spent more than 5 minutes since May of this year. If you really want to know where I live, you can probably figure it out in there. Come on over. Coffee's on me. So quantified self. Is it going to work? What is it? It was started in 2008 by Kevin Kelly and Gary Wolf. Kevin Kelly was one of the founding editors at Wired. Gary Wolf was a writer and then an editor there. They saw the PC revolution come. They saw that all of that technology that made computers so that you could have a phone, a smartphone, you could have a laptop, was coming even closer to the body. It was not going to live on your desk. It wasn't going to live in your pocket. It was going to live much closer, close to your skin. They called that the quantified self, and they had a meetup. They said, what are you guys doing? Come talk to us about what you're doing with this kind of new technology, how you're tracking your life. That one meetup in 2008 has grown to 114 different meetups all over the world, of which there are now almost 23,000 members. That number was from earlier this week, so the number's probably a little bit higher. And we're in over 30 different countries all over the world. We put on 2 worldwide conferences. It's a lot of fun. But what do we actually do at all of these different meetups? We go through a process that we call show and tell, which is exactly what you think it is if you went to kindergarten in the United States. It is, we ask people to tell us what is the things that they are doing in their lives. We ask them to answer 3 simple questions. What did you do? How did you do it? And what did you learn? It turns out that answering 3 simple questions, first, is really hard, but it is really enlightening for both the speakers and the people that attend. So of those show and tell talks, we've been able to capture a lot of them, again, from our worldwide community. We have over 620 of those talks. A lot of them are patients talking about tracking their health. A lot of them are people like me. I'm lucky enough that I don't spend a lot of time in the medical system talking about stuff that's interesting to me and that inspires me to understand me and the world that I live in. All those talks are freely available. They're up on Vimeo. You can go look at them anytime you want. We think of ourselves as a community of individuals, of people, practitioners, people making tools, people using tools, physicians, researchers, kind of just runs the gamut of individuals. And we're here to really share in the process of discovery, of understanding what knowledge is and how we can create it, and inspiring other people to create their own knowledge in their lives. I really like this quote from a paper that was written the year I was born in 1981 by an experimental psychologist named Alan Nuringer. The paper is actually available. It's a free publication online. That bit.ly link directs right to it. The solution to our problem is not a pill, it's not some product, but rather a continuous process of discovery and change. And if you get nothing else, that is what we do, and what we're really passionate about at Quantified Self is trying to enable people to participate in this continuous process of discovery and change. And we really enjoy sharing the methods of what we do. That's why we have those show and tell talks, so people can say, this is exactly how I did this thing, and if you want to do this thing, this is how you can do it too. So there we go. Here's some good examples of the talks. This is Nancy Doherty. She is here in the Bay Area. She is a great engineer. She decided that she wanted to understand her emotional reactions while at work. So she created a really simple EMG, well, simple for her, terribly difficult for me, a simple EMG that was connected to, EMG measures your muscles, connected to some LED strands. And whenever she smiled, those LEDs would light up. And they really showed her a lot about kind of how she practiced at work and how she was actually engaging with other people. Like when she was going to go talk to someone about a project, that she would always smile before talking to them, or go right about when she was about to engage with them. And that usually led to a really nice interaction. The next project is actually, again, done out here in the Bay Area by Dave Marvitt at Fujitsu Labs. They're developing a research project called Sprout, where they can stream wirelessly a lot of physiological data and process it on mobile devices. And he learned through measuring his heart rate and skin conductance that going to work is stressful, but not until he gets off the freeway on that exit ramp to his actual office. So what he did is took that data and said, okay, I meditate pretty regularly. I can take that practice of meditation and mindfulness and bring it into my actual work, like my commute to get to work, and try and reduce that level of stress as I'm pulling into the office and probably going to a meeting like we all do. Okay, more. These are two of my favorite talks for the people that are in research or in the science community, or people just interested in like, why does this matter? Like, why would personal data even matter? Ian Eslick and Mark Drangsholt. Ian Eslick is a recent PhD graduate from MIT. He did some really great work on a project called Personal Experiments, trying to teach people how you can actually engage with your own data and ask yourself interesting questions. That led to some really cool collaborations with patients in the Collaborative Care Network, the C3N project with Cincinnati Children's. Mark Drangsholt is not a researcher, but he is a cardiologist. He actually has heart rhythm disorder, and he was able to use what's called a case crossover design in order to understand how his heart rhythm disorder was actually affecting him and what might be the triggers, much like Hugo was saying earlier. Those, again, videos up online. And then one of the things that we really enjoy, maybe it's just because I'm a super visual person, I love the visualizations that come out of our group. I want to draw your attention to your top left, which is that circle. That is some data from a type 1 diabetic who has a research project called Databetes in New York. That's his actual 24-hour blood glucose taken from a Dexcom. And then on your bottom right is an individual that has an artificial aorta who has to test his INR values. And he wanted to know what actually is going to affect my blood coagulation. So we started looking at diet, started testing it. He got his physician to actually let him take a monitor so that he could do his testing at home and test his blood values once a week. We have a great variety of visualizations that are good examples. That's the link that you see up there. If you want to look into the future of where this self-tracking is going, Larry Smarr down at UCSD is a good person to look into. He's doing some really great projects in terms of can you visualize large-scale data like your MRI in 3D, and what can you do if you genetically sequence your full microbiome. Keeping on the future of things, there's a researcher down at the University of Texas at Austin. He's their head of imaging. He has a project which he calls My Connectome. Website is up there, in which he is actually doing 2 MRIs, which is crazy, 2 MRIs every week, taking a blood test every week. He's tracking his sleep and also tracking his physical activity and tracking his diet. Supposedly that data will be online for researchers to be able to look into. This is one of the largest scale self-tracking projects that we've seen in the community. I'm almost done here, and I'm going to go back to this article because the reason why I highlight all of that stuff, like why I show you Nancy and why I show you all those visualizations and show you Larry's stuff, is because all of this doesn't happen in isolation. Sure, these people are looking at their data at home on their computer. You know, I made my little visualization. It took me a long, long time, you know, at home, like 3 in the morning. But the reason I make it is because it helps me communicate with other people, and it helps me have real conversations, and which is exactly what Alan Nuringer was saying in this article about self-experimentation, is that it sounds isolating, but what it does is it helps you have those conversations with other people that are like you. So I was like, I should have a message. Like, how could I have as a message? So my message for individuals, especially the patient community, is that when it comes to your personal data, there's like 3 things you can do. Luckily, they all start with D. One is actually demand your data. Say that this is mine, I need to have it. And then if you are going to demand it, actually download it. Download it, keep it for yourself, and then try and do some things. And that doing some things is starting to create a dialogue. And when I say dialogue, I mean dialogue at the broadest sense, whether that is you talking to yourself in your own head or with your computer or with a statistics program or in Excel. That's great. If you can start to expand that dialogue on Twitter or to other patients, even better. But it all starts with actually having some access to that personal data. We have a conference in Amsterdam coming up. You guys should come. It's a lot of fun. You can talk about this. You can see all these talks in person. And that's it. That's our quantified self.
Thank you so much, Ernesto. This is great. Very exciting. So we're going to jump right into the next talk, the next speaker, Chris Haag. Chris is currently the VP of Data at Practice Fusion, and he was founder and CEO of 100+. Chris is a longtime digital health advocate, data junkie, and fascinated by the complexities of healthcare. His goal is to improve health one data point at a time. Let's join me in welcoming Chris.
Thanks, Hugo. Great. Thanks a lot for having me. My name is Chris. That was a great introduction. Thank you very much. I'm the third bearded guy with glasses from the right in this picture. So I think, unfortunately, we're still in the era of disconnected health. I think right now we're starting to leave this era, but we're still very disconnected from our bodies. We're disconnected from the health data that we might be collecting. We go to our doctor when we get sick and have them try to fix us, but most people are very disengaged from what's going on with their bodies and health. And the outcome here is that being disengaged leads to very poor health. If we don't have a personal, deeper connection to our bodies and health, it leads to a lack of presence, and that we're just not really sure what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and that leads to obesity epidemic and everything that falls out from that. As Hugo said earlier, patient engagement's the blockbuster drug. I think the only way to solve the large health problem that we have is to bring people more involved with their own health, their own bodies, and build a connection again that we can each have with our own bodies and health. So the real question, though, is what is engagement and who is your audience? Is it trying to make a person who's fit exercise every day, or is it trying to allow an obese diabetic some information about what's going on in their body so that they're thinking about their daily activity, what they're eating, whether they're measuring their glucose or taking their medications? The solutions are very, very different, and it's very important to understand what the goals are of engagement and try to define that up front. I started a company called 100+ to try to understand more about engagement. We wanted to create a product that was very consumer feeling, that helped people engage with their health on a day-to-day basis and do small healthy things in their daily life, like take the stairs or eat a slightly healthier meal. We learned a lot through the process. Here we did a project with Kaiser, and this was the beginning of it. We had pretty nice engagement. We were doing things like emails and interacting with people to try to improve engagement. And here you can see that people on average were doing 10 activities in our product every week, which was fairly high, and what we saw with our consumer group as well. This became a really interesting experiment because right at the end of this line, we made the decision to sell the company. And so what happened is we decided to let the experiment run, but we stopped all of the outside engagement hooks that we were doing. We stopped feature release. We weren't doing emails anymore and sort of let it run. And so we ended up with a really pure experiment of what happens to engagement over time with when people are left to their own devices. If you blow this up, you see these really interesting plateaus of different people losing engagement over time to about 6 months, where it really fell down back to baseline. We also, at 100+, we learned a really important lesson that the people most in need of health solutions are the least likely to go seeking them and trying to find them. This is a strong inverse relationship, and it's not even close to linear in our experience. So we really have to understand, how do we get at the people most in need by using data? So I believe that the way that all of this comes to bear is in the doctor-patient relationship. This is how most people start to experience their health, is in concert with a professional. Most people today are still not thinking about their health on a day-to-day basis, and they only think about it when they go to the doctor. And if we can empower that relationship by using data, I think it'll pay really, really interesting dividends going forward. So I believe this. I sold the company to Practice Fusion, which is an electronic medical record company in San Francisco, because I wanted to explore how to use data and how to use this relationship between patient and doctor to improve health. And the first thing is, I'm a data junkie, as I said. I think a lot can be done with the data we're collecting. But the first step today is that we have data that's coming out of an electronic medical record. It's coming out of visits. It's a very dense data, but it's very, very punctuated. And doctors today have almost an impossible job. They have a visit with a patient, they spend 15 minutes, they collect a lot of data, and then they have no information about what happened in those gaps. So the patient goes out into the wild and they lose them, and then they see him again in maybe 6 months or a year with no data of what happened. This is where tracking and self-tracking and all of the data we're starting to collect on ourselves is going to come into play. Because these passive streams of data, the things that we collect in between the visits on a daily basis, will fill in these gaps. It's going to create a deep longitudinal look at what's happening with me, my body, and my patient. And I think more importantly, it's going to fundamentally change the relationship we have with doctors. Now, all of a sudden, I'm an equal participant. I'm bringing my own data, I'm bringing my own insights, I'm bringing my own knowledge into the equation, and the conversation between patient and doctor is going to change fundamentally. I think we're going to all feel empowered. It's going to change from very much a paternalistic view to much more of a partnership where this is a trusted advisor. But I'm bringing a lot to the table myself. When we get really sophisticated, the data that we're collecting, we can generate algorithms on that are reading and constantly looking for what's happening in the data to trigger events. So now all of a sudden somebody's watching and looking out for me when my doctor can't, even when I can't, because maybe I won't know. Maybe I'm a heart failure patient and I can see that my activity level on my Fitbit is declining, my weight is increasing because of my Withings scale. Well, that's a very obvious sign that something's going wrong. And we can create these automatic prompts to reach out and bring them back into the system before they're in the hospital. We're not obviously the only ones thinking about this in this room. This is an article from this morning in Wired talking about how Fitbit and like devices are going to fundamentally change medical practice and how doctors treat you. There's a ton of things that can be done. This is our friend Rachel, who works at Misfit. She tracks a lot of different things. There's devices are proliferating. We can track everything. We can track glucose. We can track our sleep, our mood through apps. We can track our activity, obviously. But it's still actually a bit of work for people. And I think the goal is to improve the cost-benefit ratio as much as we can, drive the cost down to nothing, and increase the benefit exponentially. You still have to wear the device, sync it. It sounds crazy. It's a lot of work for some people. But I think that things are changing. I think that the phone, the thing that we carry around in our pocket, is going to be a true solution here. Recently, Apple obviously added the M7 chip, which is essentially an activity tracker that's in your phone all the time. And there's a lot of rumors about what's going to come in iOS 8 on the health front. I don't think we need 100% fidelity of every step. What we can collect just by carrying the phone around on a day-to-day basis is going to be very, very significant. So I would say that just because we're in this room, everyone's interested in this topic, and I think that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The timing is really, it's an unbelievable time right now. A lot of us have been looking at this field for a very long time. There seems to be a constellation of factors that are all occurring right now with payment reform, engagement, data, and sensors. So we're at a very lucky time here. And what I would say is go forward, take this lucky opportunity that we have to be right here at this time right now, and whether you're doing it from inside medicine or from without, go and do great things. And I look forward to reading about them someday. Thank you very much.
This is great. Well, thank you so much for a great talk, Chris. We're going to jump right into our next speaker, Rick Valencia. Rick is a lifelong technology entrepreneur turned health technology corporate executive. He founded and runs Qualcomm Life, Qualcomm's wireless health business, whose mission is to mobilize healthcare and whose longer-term vision is a world with access to healthcare anytime, anywhere. To achieve these objectives, Qualcomm Life is creating an open, medical-grade wireless technology platform that enables their partners to focus on what they do best, deliver quality care solutions. Join me in welcoming Rick Valencia, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. All right. Thank you very much, Hugo, for that wonderful introduction. And with that, I don't need to give my speech anymore. So we're talking about when, who, and how long will patients engage. And I thought a little bit about the topic. And when you think about self-tracking and patient engagement, I think of two very different things. I think of very different types of motivation. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was really appropriate, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to help create the ability for the average person to become a self-tracker. Those of you who are quantified selfers, you're not the average person, and you know it. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the world of self-tracking available to everybody, and particularly the people who need it the most. And by doing that, what we're trying to do is abstract out the element of dealing with technology and bringing technology together and making technology work. We want to do that for the healthcare world and let the patient and the doctors focus on getting well and caring for their patients. So let me take you a little bit through this. Hugo was nice enough to share with you our mission and vision, but what I want to share with you today is how we're going about creating an environment that helps to enable engagement, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And the first thing we're trying to do is mobilize healthcare. We're not a healthcare company. Most of you, you're from the tech world, so you've heard of Qualcomm. When I go into most healthcare audiences, they don't know who Qualcomm is. But we're not a healthcare company, for sure. We're building technology that will help patients get connected to their doctors quickly, simply, and very securely. And we believe longer term in a world with access to healthcare anytime, anywhere. And what we mean by that is that we think healthcare at some point is going to be like a lot of other things that are wirelessly enabled. It's going to be always on. It's going to be available for you where you are and when you need it. And to do that, what we've done is we've created the TuNet platform. And TuNet, what it does, and I brought up two medical devices, and the point of these, I'm not going to show you any demonstration or anything, but this is a Fora thermometer, and this is a Nonin pulse oximeter. They're two different manufacturers. They've got different types of radios in them. They were both intended to communicate, but frankly, they don't much when you use them individually, when a patient just buys one at the store and brings it home. Because why? Because you have to set it up, and people just don't like doing that. And it's complicated. And if they set it up the first time and then it breaks once, they never set it up again. So these things intend to communicate, but they generally don't. And we had one customer come tell us that 80% of the devices that they sent out never sent the first message of data. And so what we've done is that we've created the enabling technology in this TuNet hub, and now we have it also in the mobile device, that makes these interoperable. It doesn't matter who the manufacturer is. It doesn't matter who what the radio is. It doesn't matter the combination of devices you use enabled to manage a condition. Everything works and works simply, and the patient doesn't have to engage in the technology. So the topic is when, who, and how long. So when? Now is the easy answer. So what's happening, of course, in the world of healthcare, particularly right now with the Affordable Care Act, is that we see care moving from the acute care setting, where obviously it's very expensive, to home care. And with that move, we think that wireless technologies, leveraging the cloud, we have the world store of information in the cloud, we have the ability to act upon the data when we have it in digital form. We think that the wireless network is going to play an enormous role in helping to deliver that care in the home setting, or at least outside of the hospital and the doctor's office. So when is now, as we go through this transition of moving as much care as you can outside of the more expensive acute care setting. The who is the close to 1 billion people with chronic disease. I didn't mention this before, but the TuNet platform, the hub, the back-end platform, TuNet Mobile, is all an FDA-registered Class 1 MDDS medical device. So we're talking about dealing with serious medical conditions and people that are motivated for different reasons than the quantified selfers. But we're talking about close to 1 billion people with a chronic disease around the world. In the US and Europe alone, it's 300 million people, and those people make up 80% roughly of the total spend in healthcare in the US. And it's getting worse, as we all know, because we're getting older, we're getting sicker, we're getting fatter, and these 10,000 folks a year that are turning 65, and many of them are retiring with a chronic disease for the most part, and adding more burden to the system. So the WHO is these patients with chronic disease for the most part, because they're also the patients that end up in the hospital, and they're also the folks that we worry the most about, not just admissions, but readmissions. And then finally, the how long. So our customers tend to focus in 3 different categories. Preventive, that's more the quantified selfer type profile. That's the preventive side of things, is the individual who's motivated themselves to engage, to go buy things online, to go get them set up. It's also typically the business model is a consumer pay type of model where they're forking over their own money. So they're motivated in their own way for their own reasons. And then we have the transitional patient, the patient that's moving from the acute care setting to home and needs to be monitored for a period of time. And then finally, the complex care environment for patients with a serious condition that's being monitored. The latter two, transitional and complex care, there are some reimbursement mechanisms, minimal right now, but both of them are being primarily focused on these days for their ability to help control costs in a system that's overburdened, as we all know, with costs as it is. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to Hugo, and we'll get started with the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. And so, yeah, we should just jump right into the questions. This is exciting. I think we have a lot of questions from our audience. If you're following us on Twitter, it's hashtag MedX. Make sure you tweet your questions to hashtag MedX. And Chris Snyder is our moderator on Twitter tonight. So make sure you're sending your questions so that we can share with our panel. So let's see if there are any, we got questions here. Just a moment.
So I have to say, by way of full disclosure, as a recovering entrepreneur who launched a health engagement platform back in 2006, I have the term quantified self, I have somewhat visceral reaction to. And my question is, I haven't had as much exposure the last couple of years. Has it graduated beyond, my initial reaction is a lot of healthy people that were already healthy documenting their behavior. But in terms of applicability and lessons learned for the broader group, and looking at Chris's inverse relationship of the folks that really need to get out there and start tracking and doing this, are there lessons learned? What can be learned from your cohorts, folks that are healthy and doing the right thing already?
Well, I mean, I personally don't like the idea of like there's this thing that is a quantified selfer. I mean, we're all just people. And there's a wide variety of people. I was just in a meeting with a person, a woman from Sweden. She comes to quantified self meetups. She's given excellent talks about how she with her Parkinson's disease. And then because she's given these talks and she's learned things about how hard it is for her to track her, I'm going to try and channel her here, her 6 different medications that she takes at 6 different times during the day with 6 different time intervals. She's able to actually start getting some research grants, so to understand how she can affect other Parkinson's patients and help them understand what's going on in their lives, rather than saying like, this is the medications that you need to take, this is my process, and maybe you can learn from process. And I think that's where we are, if you want to think of like us as a community, we're trying to understand like, what can we learn from process? That being said, there are a lot of people that understand that there's a treasure trove of personal data, and that generalizability is a thing that we all want. We all want to know, how many steps a day should I be actually taking? And that once people, both the companies and the individuals and the researchers kind of agree on how data flows work, maybe we might get there.
A real quick follow-up to that. I was really discouraged by Rick's categorization of preventive being kind of an odd case of people that are these special people with their own kind of motivation. Let's leave them on their own, and then let's focus over here with the people that are already chronic. That concerns me. I mean, it strikes me that we need to move towards quantified self being more mainstream, not being an edge case, and prevention being a mainstream piece of everybody, regardless of where you are in that spectrum. Do you have any thoughts about
I
how that?
completely agree. I was really trying to describe business models and motivation.
That's my concern. That's exactly my concern. The business models are in that space
I
still.
think you're absolutely right. I think that's where we are as a world today, but I think you're right. I think, you know, I would also mention that how many of you are wearing some sort of activity tracker or use some sort of weight scale, wireless weight scale? So we're all, to some degree, or a lot of us, are quantified selfers then, in my view, because we're tracking something. And I think that what's going on with the Fitbits of the world is that we're creating now this mental model of what it could be like to engage in this type of activity for prevention, engage in this type of activity as we age and we develop chronic disease, or we actually do need to have a serious condition managed. So I don't think of the quantified selfers strictly as this group of nerdy folks that just care about figuring out weird things about their own body. I think that we're all becoming quantified selfers, and I think that as we do that and we learn more and more about the art of the possible through this, then we introduce the possibility of having preventive care delivered that way on a more continuous basis and make it more part of the system.
Well, we're going to Twitter with some questions and some shout-outs. Philip Jeffrey from Vancouver, Erin Gilmer from Austin, Texas, Matt B. Korg from Boston. Shout out to Hal Tweet from Australia. And a few questions here from Twitter. Folks are. There is a comment here first before the questions. A comment from Britt that there is a difference between motivating somebody to self-track and a chronic patient's need for data. It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to. Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Right. And here's a question from Erin Gilmer. Any tips on dealing with data overload? I suppose that would be for Ernesto, I suppose, or anybody else who wants to answer
You're the data junkie.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I think data overload on both sides of the patient and provider is a huge problem. When we interview doctors and you talk about these types of data streams coming into play, it's one of the top fears is an avalanche of data. And so I think we spend a lot of time, and QS does as well, is how to make the data invisible so that the insights are allowed to float to the surface. And we spend a lot of time thinking about data visualization and insight engines that are trying to find meaning out of the raw data. Because if we dump a Fitbit stream into an EMR to a doctor, it's going to be a losing proposition for sure. What we need to do is understand the meaning out of it. And so I think that the raw data is going to get pushed down. There'll be an insight analytic layer that lives on top with visualization on top of that. And that's all anybody should ever see. That's the layperson and physicians.
Yeah.
As a physical therapist, I feel very concerned about the new part of the technology because they're recommending to use these phones. And let me tell you, that brings me a lot of patience because they sit on those telephones, they twist their backs, they are really causing a lot of torsions in the spine, and they fall in trying to pick up these phones. Fractures, brachial plexus damage, surgeries. So the best thing that I could say is that have a mirror. Have a mirror in your refrigerator. So when you open the refrigerator, you know what it looks like.
Here Can somebody repeat? Did you guys hear that?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, like the idea that there's the phones are. I mean, there's good and bad to all of these. That phones are great; they can do all this stuff, but they can also cause us some physical harm. Whether it is, I mean, trust me, I'm sure we all have looking down at a phone, walking in a crowded place, and bumped into someone. We've had those injuries.
Cars are great, but we get in car accidents as well.
That's right.
We swim upstream a lot. I try to swim downstream when I can, and phones are there. So,
but it's a good point, and
Yes.
Especially with with certain people, that you need to be able to offer in these types of solutions other ways, not just smartphone solutions.
Yeah.
Oh, we have one more question from Twitter, and then we'll go back to our audience here. So this is an interesting question for whoever wants to take this on. This is a question from Courage Sings. Any data or any insight on how social determinants like income, for example, influence the ability to self-track?
That's a great question. I don't have any data. I don't actually think the field is so nascent that those kind of studies are. I'd be surprised if there's not a good 2 or 3 PhD students that are looking into that. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has done a lot of work on the social determinants of health. And for those that don't know, that health is not a thing that you create on your own. It is something that has a multi-causality, that it is both who you are, your internal, you and your family and friends, you and the place that you live, you and the organization that you work in, you and your community, you and your nation. Obviously, then it gets bigger and bigger. And we know that self-tracking is from a health standpoint, is really just one small piece of that.
I have a question about your very interesting chart about the movement away from acute care monitoring to home health care and self-monitoring, and the fact that most people who have the chronic conditions, as I think you pointed out maybe, are 65 or older. They don't necessarily have a smartphone. They're not the wired people.
Right.
And so do your thoughts include development of caregiver apps where, for example, in a care facility or for individual home care providers, the patient is wired up but is incapable of themselves sending the data that needs to be sent, and how your company would respond to that and create like a HIPAA compliant or a Part 11 compliant program that would allow someone else to respond on behalf of the wired patient.
We've got it right now. That's exactly what we're doing. And in fact, as it relates to the capturing of the biometric data, we have the ability to use a smartphone. I can show you later if you want me to give you a quick demonstration. But we've also got a device that is like a nightlight. It's a home gateway device that you plug in the wall, and that's it. That's a user manual instructions. Plug it in the wall. And then you use your medical devices the way you normally would have. We've also got another platform that I didn't spend a lot of time talking about that is called Healthy Circles, which is a care coordination platform which enables the quick and secure and seamless flow of information to the care team, and enables the patient or someone on their care team to enter information on their behalf in a HIPAA compliant way.
We're going to another question on Twitter and then back to our audience here. This question comes from Britt. How can chronic patients manage the potential emotional harm, if there is one, of self-tracking?
To be completely honest, I think that's really hard for me to answer just because I don't have the experience of being a chronic patient. I honestly try to understand, mostly from a diabetic standpoint, because if you want to look back in history, like these are the original self-trackers. And, Chris, I think you had a great post around this exact same topic, which is, yeah, it's great that, some weirdo wants to put a Dexcom in their body just to understand their blood glucose over time, but they don't understand what it's like to live with this. And that the issue is, in reality, is that data, we think of it as numbers, we think of it as charts, but data has values, and those values are put on both by us, the people that collect them, and also by medical establishments, your care providers, even your social circles. And that I think that's one of the things that we still don't understand or haven't figured out is how do we come to grips with the value, that subjectivity of how we actually understand that data. There's no good answer. I mean, that's the best I can do, I guess.
I think on an emotional level, I think there's a lot greater harm from the feeling of disempowerment and being out of control. And I think if we can use tracking and data to give people a feeling of empowerment or control over what's happening, I think that the positives far outweigh the negatives. But I'm an optimist for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for such an exciting talk. 2 questions. One is, like you mentioned about patients who use these devices the least are the ones who need it the most. How do you bring more tracking and self-awareness and empowerment to mainstream medical community, to patients, chronic patients who need it most? What do you think are the challenges? What do you think is happening right now in terms of what you're able to do? Secondly, second question is about cancer. I work in oncology, and I'm interested in knowing if you are working with that population and what you are seeing.
Repeat the question for the volume of that.
So I don't think I can help out much on the oncology front, but maybe one of you guys can. And on the first order of business, which is, I guess, how do we get more of these tools in the hands of the people that need it the most, is what you're asking. And I think there's a couple of things, and you guys probably can add on to this, but I'll start with the first 2. First is having the right incentives in the system to motivate doctors to prescribe these types of solutions. So, and that goes back to the question that we got earlier also about prevention. You know, when there's money for doctors to prescribe prevention and to manage their patients in that way, it's more likely to happen. So that's number 1, is the right financial incentives in the system. And number 2 is going back to what we talked about earlier, and that is abstracting out as much of the technology as humanly possible and creating just great experiences that people are willing to engage in. And it's easy to say, but that's the hardest thing to do. Mm-hmm. And if any one of us knew the absolute right answer to that, we wouldn't be here right now. We'd be back working, making it work. But
no, I agree 100%. I think the incentive structure that's changing in healthcare is one of the largest drivers that gets me excited. That we start to see doctors who are affiliated in value-based systems start to ask questions about devices that might be able to do this and help them manage and take some of their workload off, because we're now passively managing them essentially using data and tracking. And because now they're being paid based on value versus cost, this actually makes sense now, where it didn't before. It's a fundamental shift. And the second is, building things that you just have to plug into the wall and they work. They just have to be effortless. And it's just this, there's like this fundamental truth. Incentives work, incentives rule the world, basically. People work, if you set the incentives right, the right things will happen. And cost benefit exists everywhere. So if the right cost benefit, the benefit's very high, the cost, the friction's very low, it'll work. And if you focus on those 2 things, you'll eventually get something to work.
Okay, we have one more question from Twitter, and then we'll go back to our audience here. This is a question from, this is an interesting question, which has come up before in my experience. This comes from Dr. Jonathan Hausman. Could tracking devices discourage patients from seeing their doctors if they are accomplishing their goals? So this is about cutting the doctor out of the care circle.
So he wants to protect his job. Who knows? Maybe. But, so there's the whole okay, maybe that does happen, and then we have to ask ourselves, is that such a bad thing? But you would hope that in the current system, what we actually do is elevate the conversations that happen, so that self-tracking from an individual, both from a preventative aspect or someone that is in chronic care or from a caregiver, can actually help that individual have real conversations about what is going on. Like Chris was saying, those periods in between those spikes, like that's where the magic happens. Like that's where real life happens. And if you can talk to your physician about, or whoever your care provider is, about that stuff that is actually important to you, not that your blood pressure was hypertensive, 5 minutes ago when you sat down and the scary nurse put the thing on your arm, then that's really magical. And I would like to say that self-tracking is going to make the patient-provider visit better. But again, I'm with Chris. I'm an optimist.
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Doctors are a very expensive way of delivering care, and doctors aren't going out of business anytime soon, nor should they. It's just going to change the relationship. There's a common graph if you think of a pyramid where doctors are at the top, and then nurses and other providers and caregivers. And these are the most expensive ways. If we can push care down even to a technology layer that's allowing the patients that need to come in more often, and the patients that don't need to come in very often don't come in as often, that's a great outcome.
And we're just so far away from that being the problem that I think we don't need to worry about that one quite yet.
So a couple questions. As we move from fee-for-service to fee-for-outcomes, what strikes me is that we're moving from clinical interventions to behavioral interventions, or a mix of the two. And so, two questions. The first is, your model is very doctor or physician-centric. I've certainly come across and interviewed a number of doctors that, not just incentives, kind of see being a health coach as not what they went to business or medical school for. So that's question number one, if you see that going away. And the second is, what we don't have right now is good intervention efficacy data in terms of what works. And so the two of you, Rick and Chris, your companies are coming at it from different angles in terms of creating a data platform. You've got integration with the physician workflow. You've got a purpose-built platform. So if I'm betting, first of all, do you see yourselves as competitors? And if so, who do I bet on?
They just invested in us.
We just made a big investment in the company, so no, we love these guys.
Yeah, so absolutely. Around the health coach, so we have a lot of primary care docs. So a lot of them do want to be in this business of prevention. They just want to be able to get paid for it and do it well, and be able to carve out the time to do it. The other is the absence of data that these interventions work is an absolute fundamental problem. I think that there's some really interesting companies that are coming out that are doing clinical trials with behavioral interventions or technology-based interventions, and I think that that's a model that must be followed. We have to know that that what we're producing is generating the right, the outcomes that we expect them to, and they're following a very biotech model. Actually, they're running 500, 200, 1,000 person clinical trials. They're just using technology instead of chemistry.
And I would say that we're an enabler. We're creating the infrastructure and the network, the secure medical grade network that gets data from patients who are outside of the doctor's office, outside of the hospital, back to the doctor so they can better manage their patients. So I see them as very complementary, and again, we just made a big investment in them. So we obviously believe in what they're doing as well.
I just want to say one thing to the behavioral intervention. So someone who at least somewhat fashions myself as understanding some behavioral science, that the idea that a physician or an individual can take something and do things as an individual is somewhat flawed. We don't operate in bubbles, and but I think part of what happens is QS as an idea can actually really help support what true interventions really look like, because it's data all the way down, but also data all the way up. So if you know all the way down to from your genome up to your physical activity data, to the air you're breathing, and kind of the data about your community, how much green space is in the area that I live, what's the walkability score of my neighborhood, all the way up to how good is the schools, to what are the laws like, and all of those are layers of data that influence health in some way.
Yeah, and I'd throw out the piece I think you're missing is the behavioral genome. Sorry. I'd say the piece you're missing is the behavioral genome, kind of what makes people tick and what gets them to actually change their behavior, which is straight out of marketing, quite frankly, applied to healthcare. I know that most people have some issues with that.
Well, with that, unfortunately, we get to wrap this up. This is the end of another wonderful discussion, and it's too bad. It just feels like the time goes by so quickly, and there's so many questions. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank you, our audience, and I want to thank our panelists, Ernesto Ramirez and Chris Hogg and Rick Valencia. I wish to thank our speakers for spending their valuable time with us tonight. Please remember, all of you out there, to join us next week, Thursday, March 13th, with guest lecturer Nir IL, who will speak to us about designing for habits. You don't want to miss that. Stanford Medicine X e-patient scholar Dana Lewis will moderate the discussion. And on behalf of Stanford Medicine X, the Stanford AIM Lab, and class faculty, Dr. Larry Chu, who is not here with us tonight, but hopefully watching through the web, and Dr. Kyra Bobinette, who's right here with us tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this class on self-tracking for patient engagement with Chris Hogg, Ernesto Ramirez, and Rick Valencia, with guest moderator Hugo Campos. Please also remember to join us again next week, Thursday, March 13th, with special guest Nir Eyal, who will speak on the topic Designing for Habits. Stanford Medicine X e-patient scholar Dana Lewis will give the opening Ignite talk and moderate the discussion. If you are enjoying this class, please join us again next quarter for Design for Health, a new class from the Stanford University School of Medicine on applying design innovation to improve healthcare. This course is brought to you by Stanford Medicine X, and weekly programs begin April 3rd, 2014. Dr. Larry Chu and Dr. Kyra Bobinette will serve as co-directors of the course. On behalf of Stanford Medicine X, the Stanford AIM Lab, class faculty, myself, Dr. Larry Chu, and Dr. Kyra Bobinette, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.